Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kelly Green Hour. We apologize for not being on Friday. Sickness, it happens. This is our first Kelly Green Hour coming off of a loss. And that game on Sunday was not pretty, to say the least. I'm your host, LG Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, how you feeling, man? I
I,
know you didn't
I'm
have a voice over the weekend.
I'm feeling better. I don't know these seasonal allergies, man. When the seasons change and the weather's changing, they can mess with me pretty bad. So this it was a rough go Friday. I hated to cancel, but yeah, I guess we would have talked a lot about the game. Got really excited just to be let down. Probably worse. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like if we had actually had a show. So the letdown was still really bad, but I mean we're going to get into it. There's so much to talk about with this game, and it's. I don't think there's many positives, unfortunately. There,
No.
there was a good positive going for most of the game, but that positive, that man threw his positive out the door pretty quickly later in the game. So
Yeah. But before we jump into the game. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10, and follow me on Twitter at LJ Harrell54. And follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook. Just search Edge of Philly Sports. And if you're tuning in live, let us know your thoughts on the game. It wasn't pretty. The second half was ugly. The injuries obviously were not pretty. It's something that. So I was on the pregame show Sunday morning, and we have to do our 5 keys for the pregame show. Here are my 5 keys, and you tell me if I hit it on the part. Jalen Hurts must protect the football. That's number one. The red zone offense has to score. They scored twice in the red zone, right? They scored two. Two out of whatever. They scored 2 touchdowns. Brown and Smith must beat the backup cornerbacks. A.J. Brown had a day. Devontae Smith, on the other hand, had probably his worst day as a pro. The O-line versus the Jets D-line, because this is going to be the best defensive line that the Eagles have faced all year. Guess what? After Lane Johnson went out, Jack Driscoll got beat like a drum. It was like a turnstile. And the last one, you cannot allow Zach Wilson to beat you because he stinks. And you didn't force any turnovers from Zach Wilson. You sacked him. How many times? Did they sack him 5 times? But and the defense, look, I'm not blaming. Again, I'm not coming in here blaming the defense because the defense played well. Like the defense played good enough, you win that game. They gave up 12 points. That last one, they let Brees Hall score. The offense lost the game. Jalen Hurts lost the game. Brian Johnson lost the game. Nick Sirianni lost the game. It was troublesome that after they got up to a 14-3 lead, it's like they just stopped playing. And that's not – look, we've talked about it, coming into this year. You want the number one seed. That means you could probably get 4 losses at most. And with this gauntlet of games that the Eagles have coming up, the Jets are not one of the losses, especially without Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is playing okay, potentially, you can be low. You can lose this game. But with Zach Wilson as the quarterback, without their top 3 corners on defense, you cannot lose that game. And that's exactly what happened on Sunday. And the one thing I was thinking, Connor, before I let you go, and I apologize for making this long-winded, the first 5 weeks of the season, the Eagles escaped a couple of games, right? It was like, and it felt like maybe it felt like maybe there were cracks that were forming, but the Eagles were able to overcome them. It felt like against the Jets, it just shattered. And we've mentioned it time and time again, they have a gauntlet coming up, and they need to play 1,000 times better than they played on Sunday.
yeah, I mean, you hit a lot. I'll check in with some of these people. Daniel Berry, yo, welcome aboard. You're always joining us. Thank you so much. Mr. Crockpot, we do an entire show to preview each game and to talk and react to the games. And it doesn't matter how good or bad it is. We sit here and we do it. And we know that there's going to be a lot of bad to talk about. So hopefully there's no Jets fans listening because I'm sure they'd loved, not that their team was better, but I mean, they were better enough to
The
beat.
Eagles for the first time in their history.
Exactly. First time, like what they were, we're 12-0 heading into that makes it even worse. That just hurts even more. But you nailed it. You can't blame it on the defense. I know I was in our group chat after the game and I hate Josh Jobe. I don't like him. I get it. I mean, when you look at it, it was 2 receptions for 38 yards. And it's like, well, that's not that bad. He was saved on one big play that was going to be about 30 or 40 yards against him that was called back on a brutal blindside hit on Reed Blankenship. So, I mean, I'm not going to blame anyone in that regard, though. That his 2 catches were allowed against Garrett Wilson, and those were where I made comments of that's just a situational thing where I think Sean Desai needs to realize you can't have Josh Jobe on Garrett Wilson. He can't go on a number 1 wide receiver. I don't particularly trust him on a number 2 wide receiver for any team. So, and then I think a play or two after he gave up a big play to Garrett Wilson, James Bradbury broke up throw to Garrett Wilson in the end zone. So it just goes to show you how quickly, if you put the right people on the right players for the other team, you can slow things down. So that was my only knock on the defense. So I'll get it out of the way now because you knew I was going to say something about Josh Jobe. But offensively, I mean, you nailed it. I mean, the injuries were bad. Like we talked about, one of the keys to this season was if the injuries could be like last year, we can have a wildly successful year again. Definitely not to the tune of last year because the schedule was 10 times easier. But yesterday or Sunday alone, we ended up walking out with 7 or 8 guys injured, and now here comes the news: Bradley Roby's going to miss a few weeks.
We have 1 healthy safety right now in the roster.
1 healthy safety, and it
Terrell
doesn't
Edmonds.
seem there's no seeming urgency because they always said they were going to be cautious with Reed Blankenship. So to think that he would be going Sunday, I don't think so. So, and then obviously you have Justin Evans who just hit the IR. Bradley Roby's hurt. Slay's injured.
And when all the injuries happened, Mekhi Gardner, who has never played safety before, he was a cornerback in college at LSU. He came on and played safety. So it was Edmonds and Gardner. Evans is on IR. Sidney Brown hopefully can come back, but who knows? Like he has a hamstring injury, right? Like who knows how long that can linger. And if you think about it, like, and now we talk about Bradley Roby's out, Eli Ricks is out. Like all the injuries that were sustained in the back end of the second in the defense, and the fact like they played well. I get it. There were a couple of plays that were made, some penalties here and there, but like for the guys that were out there who've probably never played a game together in their lives, like that group of corners and safeties, they played well. Like, and you would have to hope that this week that Slay will be back. Excuse me. I think he'll be back anyway. I'm pretty sure. I think
he's going to make his best effort to, because if not, we're in trouble.
I mean, we're in trouble anyway. Like we don't have the speed in the secondary to run with Waddle, with Hill, with that, even with Anderson, if he were to be active, like he's fast too.
Even with Darius Slay in, I mean, Darius Slay against true number 1s has not looked very good this year. So,
like Bradbury's not a fast corner. He's more of a physical corner. He's a bigger corner. Slay would be the faster corner. We're probably gonna have to see some Kaylee Ringo this week. They brought Josiah Scott back, and we know how bad he was last year. But they need a nickel corner because Roby's out probably for a couple of weeks. So. I mean, we talked about it. And the one thing I had also mentioned in the pregame show was that one of the big keys or one of the big matchups was the Eagles versus the MetLife Stadium in terms of the injuries that could possibly happen. And that's all that happened. Lane Johnson played 9 plays, and we know what the Eagles' record is with him compared to without him. They don't win when he's not on the field. So, like, and it's fortunate that his injury is what they call like a low ankle sprain, and it's kind of like a pain tolerance thing if he can play, because we know how tough of an SOB he is. If he can be out there, if he can walk, he'll play. And that's
the fact that it's not a high ankle is a good thing, because the high ankle sprain that he tried to play through in the past was the reason that destroyed his ankle. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they called it a lateral ankle sprain. So the fact that it's a lateral ankle sprain probably is a really good thing, because he can probably play through that pain without completely destroying his ankle like he did the last time he tried to play through. But I mean, even if he's out for one game, I mean, I I personally would probably heading into this gauntlet of games would rather have him miss one game and get himself really right if we have to sacrifice one game without him than, further in the injury and playing through it for one game for the sake of coming back and being that tough SOB that he is. That's my only concern. I don't want to see it get worse and then go into, the Dallas game, the Buffalo game, the KC game, where we need to, now that we lost one game, we need to come out 500 in this stretch of 7 games. We need to come out on the better side of 4-3 or 5-2, because if we're 3-4, 2-5, we can throw away the number 1 seed. And we might even be at a point where we could be throwing away the NFC East. First in the NFC East. The saving grace would be, the NFC is not that great, although it's not looking as bad as some speculated it to be. So we don't want to be the ones sitting there staring down, I don't want to talk about 9-8 or 10-7 as a possibility, but that being a realistic possibility, especially once you get through those games with the injuries that we have and how we've played. Like, let's not sugarcoat, the injuries suck, but
they haven't played
the offensive play, the full 60 minutes of everyone playing together still has not come around. And I don't know if we're going to see it. Like, I just don't think, I haven't seen enough put together for more than 2 quarters by either side, except the defense in this game pretty much played at 4 quarters of amazing football. But I haven't really seen them be able to put it together for more than 2 quarters on both sides of the football yet. And that's frustrating. So, and I mean, Jack Driscoll is it like this Miami defense hasn't been like up to the par that like a lot of people thought they would be, but there's still a solid defense. Jalen Ramsey's ahead of schedule. I hope he's not back this week. I don't think it doesn't look like it. So, but Jack Driscoll allowed 8 pressures, and there was a stat out there. I can't remember exactly, but the last time an Eagles offensive lineman allowed 8 pressures, and it was actually quite a while ago. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. It's been quite a while. It was last year. I think it was last year or the year before
when Winston Justice gave up 5 sacks against the Giants back in Andy Reid days.
No, it was somebody last year or the year before. I think it might have been the year before when we had the 15 different combinations, which of course at that point you expect 8 pressures to be given up by somebody or in that ballpark. But I mean, thank goodness he only gave up 1 sack, because if there was one part of the entire offense that was on, it was Jalen Hurts' pocket presence. Now we will get into his decision making and his protection of the football in a bit, but his ability to work in that pocket. And I mean, you must be exhausted after a while running around like that.
There were a couple plays that he abandoned the pocket way too soon. Like there were plays that he didn't have to. He could have stepped up or he could have hung out, but he would roll out, and that kind of broke things down. And that wasn't what we wanted to see. What's up, Ryan? Thank you, sir. Go Birds. But yeah, there were a couple of plays where he would drop back, and he was feeling pressure even though there was no pressure. And I think it was because Lane Johnson wasn't there. So yeah, like, look, hopefully if Lane Johnson can't play this week and they are going to go with Driscoll, hopefully having a week of practice under his belt, knowing that he is going to be the guy, will help Jack Driscoll. Getting thrown in there, like, he wasn't good the couple times in his career where he's had to go into the game after an injury, just like, cold, and he wasn't good. But if he gets a week's worth of preparation, he's a little bit better. But I also think he's probably better inside than he is at tackle. And that's when the thought could be, do they decide to move Mailata from left tackle to right tackle and let like Tyler Steen or Fred Johnson or somebody play left tackle? Is that going to be the best combination of guys on the field going forward? But I also think, again, if they do go with Driscoll, you're not facing the Jets defensive line. The Miami's defensive line. Look, they got Christian Wilkins, they got Chubb, right? They got Bradley Chubb. But they're still not as good and probably as physical as the Jets. So that might be good for him. But again, giving him a week's worth of preparation will do him wonders. But I'm still of the belief that if Lane Johnson can go out there, he will go out there, and that's what's going to be best for the team. And I get what you're saying. If he's hurt, or if he's hurt and the possibility of maybe injuring that ankle more, which could affect down the season, you don't want him out there. But I mean, we saw what he did in the playoffs last year with a abductor injury. Like it didn't bother him at all. He was still the dominant tackle. He hasn't given up a sack since 2020. You saw that difference because Driscoll gave up pressures right away. Like one of the interceptions that Hurts threw was his arm getting hit by Jermaine Johnson because Driscoll got beat like a drum. So like just having that, it's a mental thing, I think, for the quarterbacks. It was for Wentz. It's for Hurts. When you know you have Lane Johnson there, you don't have to really worry about pressure coming from that side.
Yeah, and I mean, and some people, like, there was some mention of the fact that Suo Peta was in there, and this was what his second full game in there at right guard. Like the right side was completely like you can't
run the football either.
Yeah, you can't trust Suo Peta in that spot to be the guy to help out the right tackle or hold his own a little bit, because he's still kind of brand new to the situation as well. He was probably leaning on, well, it's clear he was leaning on Lane Johnson a lot more. But I guess to Jack Driscoll's defense, he gave up 8 pressures, which is a bad look, but Mailata gave up 5, Suo Peta gave up 4, Landon Dickerson gave up 4. It went across the offensive line that there were issues contained in this defensive line, and I mean, rightfully so. I mean, it's a really good defensive line. They had pressure all night, no matter what. Even if it wasn't Driscoll giving up pressure, it felt like there was always pressure. And that probably, like you said, played into Jalen Hurts' mind. That's probably why Jalen Hurts was abandoning the pocket prematurely sometimes, because it played in his mind that if I'm not throwing the ball within 3 seconds here or getting the ball out, I got to move because something's breaking down. There's no way that this line's holding up. I don't think he even had the confidence in his offensive line. So, and then you make... I mean, to talk about some of the other aspects of the offense, A.J. Brown had a really good night. They were using Dallas Goedert fairly effectively. He had a pretty good night, but these last 2 games for Devontae Smith, and I posted on that Twitter account about it, have been really, really bad. He's been really bad.
He's in his own head, man.
He's definitely in his own head at this point, because he's had 3 drops over the last 2 weeks on 16 targets, and I think the stat he's had 6 receptions in that time, so 6 for 16 with 3 drops in 2 games. That's not a Brian Johnson thing, a Jalen Hurts thing. That's 100% Devontae Smith thing. He's in his own head right now, and he's got to calm down and get back to the cool, collected guy that we know he can be, and making those big play catches that we know he can make, because we've seen so many. This is definitely a slump, a little bit of a bad time for Devontae Smith, and I hope he turns it around. I mean, we haven't talked about, but Julio Jones, like somebody had mentioned, I think it was Shane who posted on Twitter that Zacchaeus and Watkins have averaged combined 2 targets per game. So you can't lean on the third wide receiver to do a whole lot. We need to lean on Devontae Smith, getting out of his head and getting back into the game, because we need that tandem of wide receivers and Dallas Goedert and Swift all working at their top level to be an effective offense.
And Goddard's targets are coming down because, like, again, if I'm Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown's catching everything that's coming to him. Even if he's covered, he's open. Like, I'm gonna throw him, and he's 3 or 4 games straight with over 125 yards receiving.
4. Philadelphia Eagles record, I think, first time in franchise history.
Yeah, of course I would throw him the ball. And when you see Devontae he's wide open in the middle of the field, and the ball's right there, hits him in the hands, and he drops it. And then Goddard they set up a perfect play on a Jets blitz. They throw the screen right over top of the blitz. Goddard catches it, has a hit out of his hand, and goes right to Quinnen Williams, and it's an interception. So Hurts had his 3 interceptions, but 2 of them weren't his fault. The other one was just an awful play. And then the fumble by DeAndre Swift. Like, you're not going to win many football games losing the turnover battle for nothing. So, and again, the defense played well. I'm not here to criticize the defense. If there's one criticism though of them, they didn't get any turnovers. And you faced Zach freaking Wilson. So that's something that's going to have to change. Like, you're coming up against Tua, who doesn't turn the ball over that much. He's pretty safe with the football. So you're going to have to find a way to force turnovers to give a short field to your offense. You can't keep having the offense going 75, 80 yards every drive, especially when they don't really have that big play capability anymore because defenses are playing back. So the Eagles have their first touchdown drive yesterday was a 19-play drive, and they got lucky because I don't think Hurts. I I can't believe they said Hurts scored that touchdown. I didn't think he did. It was a 19-play drive that they almost didn't score. And they got, again, it was a lucky Hurts being Jalen Hurts getting his anytime touchdown. That can't, like, they're not going to be getting these 3-4 play, touchdown drives anymore. You have to help your quarterback out. Don't fumble the football. Don't like have the ball hit out of your hands. Catch the football when it comes to you when you're open. And maybe we would have gotten out of that game with a win, but we didn't. Like, as the Eagles, it took the Eagles having 4 turnovers. It took the Eagles having like 7 injuries. And it took one of the worst offensive game plans I've seen in a long time for the Jets to win that game. And again, I'm not taking anything away from the Jets. Good for them. They won, blah, blah, blah. But it took a lot for the Eagles to lose that game. And if they continue to play like that, they're going to lose a lot more games coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, and I like to point out from the injury standpoint, the Jets are in equally bad of a position injury wise. They're probably one of the teams in the worst spot for injuries right now. They were missing their 2 top cornerbacks. They're missing Aaron Rodgers, who was the focal point of this whole team. He was supposed to be the team. So they're missing a lot of key players as well. So I mean, we talk about 7 in one game. Well, we're talking about their 2 top corners didn't even go out there that game. Aaron Rodgers played 3 plays for them. Like, we're talking, they haven't had some of these guys at all or very little throughout the season. So I'm never going to lean in on injuries because there was a lot more to this game than just injuries. And if Lane Johnson goes down and the whole team and the whole offense folds, well, we have to figure something out. There has to be an answer to that. Like, I get that the pressures are still going to be there. The offensive line may not be as good, but you can't look like we did in that game. And I get that it's a really good defensive line that you had to face, but you still have to hold up a little bit. 22 pressures on, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I think it was like 50 dropbacks or something. Yeah, like, you can't give up that many. He was pressured on 40% of dropbacks.
Hurts is 0 and I don't know how many games.
It was 5. It was 0-5 when they throw the ball 45 plus times or 40 plus.
40 plus pass attempts. That's not this offense. And I get it. The right side of the offensive line was not good with Sua Opeta after Lane Johnson went out and Driscoll. But it's like they abandoned the run. There was 8 Hurts runs and then 14 runs by the running backs. And I don't think the running backs saw a run it felt like the last 2.5 quarters, which was ridiculous. Like, you have the
It was terrible play calling by Brian Johnson. I can't understand it.
And I get Sirianni wanting to defend Brian Johnson and not wanting to pile on. And he's saying that he had no issue with the game plan. But after a while, you got to be like, dude, run the football. You're up 14-3. Like, and I get it. On that last drive when you're up 14-12 and it's 3rd and 9, I think, you want to get a first down. Was it 3rd and 9 or 3rd and 15? It was 3rd and whatever.
It was a deep one, and Jalen Hurts the play call was drawn up horribly. It was terrible.
Like, run the football or make it give it a safe play for Hurts where he could either run it or take a sack so the clock keeps running, because the Jets were out of timeouts at the time. You punt the ball, give the Jets the ball at the 10-yard line, and force them to have to go 50 yards to get in the field goal range. Do you think Zach Wilson would have gotten the ball into field goal range with about a minute and a half left with no timeouts? I don't know. I would have much rather seen that instead of him throwing the interception and then obviously letting Breece Hall score the touchdown so that you get the ball back. Like, you got to be smart. Think about the situation that you're in. The Jets had no timeouts. They have Zach Wilson. Their offense wasn't able to do much. They kicked 4 field goals up to that point. They weren't able to get the ball into the end zone. And you go and throw, and again, it was Jalen Hurts' decision, but because the play call was called, while I put most of the blame on Hurts, Johnson and Sirianni still deserve a little bit of a play because that was the call in that moment.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, you have to put a fair amount of blame on Brian Johnson because the game plan never really made a whole lot of sense offensively. You had a lead. One of the things you were most effective at was running the football. As soon as there were situations where, we hate Kenneth Gainwell, but he was the most effective runner for the team. But he he would bust off a big run and like get you the first down, and then they completely abandoned the run for the rest of that drive. Like situationally, it was just really bad play calling, and like it's just every time that they took a loss or only got 1 or 2 yards, he wouldn't go back to the run for 3, 4, 5 plays. Like it would be such long runs of time, and the play call, it felt like one of the longest football games too, because both teams were just passing the football because neither team could get any sort of run game going. And then and what gets me too is like we bash Zach Wilson because obviously like I think only one team has ever won a game when losing the turnover battle by 4 in NFL history. So I mean, like when you think about that, like the ball was in Zach Wilson's court, and now I wake up to these shows like First Take, these shows like all these shows that are going on, and everyone's actually talking about the Jets. Like does this prove something? Can they stand with the best of them? Because they made Josh Allen look bad, they made Pat Mahomes look bad, they made Jalen Hurts look bad. But to me, like when push comes to shove and in the playoffs where teams are dropping 20, 30 points, the Jets aren't going to be able to keep up. It's just they beat the last remaining undefeated team. They've made a fool out of the comments by Saleh as they embarrassed some high-end quarterbacks. But when push comes to shove, I still don't know if the Jets are going to be, that team. I don't think you can trust them to stop a high-octane offense when it matters. Like once we reach the playoffs, I know this isn't all about the Jets, but when I woke up and I'm seeing all these comments and all these like hot take but not hot take about the Jets and stuff, I'm like, but it's still Zach Wilson. It's still that offense. I just don't know if I trust it. I think this has created an unwarranted hype train for the Jets.
They're all thinking that somehow, some way, Aaron Rodgers is going to come back. I don't know if it's going to happen, but whatever.
Whatever he's doing, I mean, he's come a long way compared to what most people would be able to do. But I mean, I guess the Jets are under the mentality.
He's also not running. He's also not running. You don't have cleats on, and like you're not being chased by like all that matters. Like you have to be able to do all that.
But the Jets are definitely get in the playoffs, and if Rodgers can come back, we can make a run. But I still like it would be the most miraculous Achilles tear recovery in NFL, in any sports history. I can guarantee it. And it
almost
just
like Bryce Harper coming back in like the short amount of time he did after getting Tommy John surgery.
Except he hasn't really had to throw the ball. So that's the difference. Like this way, like you come out on the Achilles, there's no way you're not putting pressure on that ankle and having to test that ankle out in football. In baseball, there's ways to hide it if you're a positional player, not a pitcher. Obviously, you're a pitcher, you're done. But as a positional player, all you do is swing the batter, move to first base, and catch the ball. You can get away with coming back a little earlier, but I mean, let's talk about the defense a little bit. I mean, I don't think there's much more to say offensively. I think the Russian attack could have been better if given more of an opportunity. Gainwell had an okay game, but he was only given the ball 2 times for 13 yards. Swift, 10 carries for 18 yards. His longest was 9. So it's really 9 carries for 9 yards and 1 carry for 9 yards. And then Hurts was 8 for 47. He did really good because he had to abandon the pocket and scramble a lot. But I mean, I think if given more of an opportunity, we might have seen a bit more out of them. But Johnson got gun shy because he saw them get stuffed at the line of scrimmage and started getting fearful, even though the passing attack was doing no better than the Russian attack. So I would have liked to have seen more Russian mixed into it. It ended up being 22 rushes, but I don't count the Jalen Hurts carries unless they were designed. So like there was like maybe 4 designed carries for Jalen Hurts. And then so 14 touches for running backs just isn't going to work. I think the record with Jalen Hurts as a starting quarterback and 15 carries or less, they're like 1 and 5. So it's clearly like at this point, all these stats are out there that.
Look, I hate stats, but come on, sometimes you.
But you hate stats, but like analytically, like Brian Johnson has to look at that and say, okay, these stats are for real. Like eventually you have to look and say, okay, these are for real, where we do need to run the football a fair amount. We do have to establish ourselves there. Look at the game the week prior. We controlled time of possession like 75 to 25%. So like that's the type of things we know. the Eagles are most effective when they control time of possession. And while it may be boring and while it may be ugly, that often means we have to run the football a lot. And it often means we're going to get some big plays, but we're also going to have some that are going to hurt, and we're going to get stuffed, and we're going to get stuck.
Yeah, and hopefully that, they do their self-scouting this week, or at least they did it, on the bus ride home from Jersey, and then yesterday, and do self-scouting and realize, like, this team is built to probably, and look, again, I don't know if you can win the Super Bowl being a primarily running football team, but right now they're built to run the football. When your quarterback is struggling, when your receivers are struggling to get open, or your receivers are struggling to catch the football, at least give it an opportunity by running the football. And they didn't give Swift or Gainwell or Scott the opportunity because they only had 14 total carries. But like you said, you wanted to talk about the defense a little bit. Like without
and one thing, we have to control time of possession against Miami because you have to keep them off the football field. You have to keep that offense off the football field.
Yeah, but they're also a team that can put up 35 points by having the ball for like 20 minutes. So
because Jalen Waddle. I don't know if Devin A-Chain will be back. Hopefully not. But
he's on IR, so
true. Yeah, I forgot he was on IR. But Waddle and Hill, all it takes is one big play, and they'll go 60, 70, 80, 90 yards. It doesn't matter where the ball is.
Yeah, nobody has an angle on Tyreek Hill. Like, you may think you have an angle on Tyreek Hill, but we'll definitely talk more Dolphins later this week. And yeah, I don't know how much fun this game is going to be Sunday night. The only good part about it is the Eagles are wearing their Kelly green uniforms, so they'll look good. Hopefully, by looking good, they play good. But you wanted to talk about the defense a little bit. Without Jalen Carter, they still got pressure. Hassan Reddick, I think, had two and a half sacks.
2.5. Yep.
Jordan Davis had one sack. He had a couple of half sacks. Yeah, I mean, again, they looked good. Imagine if Jalen Carter did play. Like, it would have been even more crazy. Nakobe Dean came back, and like, he got out there. He played the least out of all three linebackers, Morrow and Cunningham. He was there. I didn't notice anything crazy. Like, I didn't notice him having spectacular plays. I didn't notice him getting beat a lot. But getting him back out onto the field, get him back, into the rotation, so that if he's going to be the starter going forward, at least he's got his feet under him. It's just that secondary, because of all the injuries that are in the secondary, that's worrisome for the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, I pointed it out on our Twitter that, I mean, Josh Sweat, he had 6 pressures. Hassan Reddick, he had 6 pressures. Jordan Davis, he had 4 pressures. And this was all without their clear best defensive tackle. So it was really, really good to see that they were getting pressure and they were taking advantage of a banged up New York Jets offensive line, because obviously, talk about injuries, I think they were missing 3 of their starters, or what was supposed to be starters from the beginning of the season, on that offensive line. So it was good that they were taking advantage of it. And with Jordan Davis, there probably would have been a sack fest. It would have been even more of a sack fest than it already was. We ended up with 24 total pressures, which was actually more than the Jets. But it obviously, we know that it was the deficiencies on offense that did us in. Yeah, I mean, they had a pretty unique split there. It looks like, obviously, linebacker-wise, like, Cunningham's the guy. He's going to be out there a lot. He played 49 snaps, and then it was Morrow for 36, and it was Dean for 32. So it kind of looks like the split comes between Morrow and Dean. Hopefully it doesn't affect Morrow's play, because Morrow was playing extremely well with a lot of work. So hopefully, seeing less work doesn't impact his play and his ability to be a force on that defense. So fingers crossed there. But I mean, Morrow had a decent game. And Dean, like you said, he had a decent game. The two of them together, they both were targeted, or they were targeted combined 3 times. They allowed all 3 receptions, but they only gave up 30 yards. So nothing huge, nothing too worrisome. But I mean, it is Zach Wilson, it is the New York Jets. So it'll be very different this week when they're forced to deal with like Raheem Mostert, when they're forced to deal with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and a lot different offense, a lot more creative offense than what we saw this past week. Cunningham, he had a rough go. He allowed, 5 receptions on 6 targets for 50 yards. So he had a bit of a rougher go, but we know Cunningham's going to have his days, especially if he's going to be, picked on with targets. But Bradbury had a great day. Bradbury targeted 10 times, and he only allowed 5 receptions for 45 yards. So he had a really good day, which is a really positive sign. We definitely need Darius Slay back.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, next week, I mean, I don't think any cornerbacks have really solved this offense and this Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill connection. And Darius Slay, like we talked about, when he's had to shadow a number one wide receiver on a team, he has not looked good. He has looked a shell of himself, but we have seen him do this in the past as well when he's been the guy who had to follow. It's just keep the guys out of the end zone.
Yeah.
Pretty much what is the goal facing some of these guys, but it's going to be a really hard goal to accomplish against the Miami Dolphins. So it'll be interesting to see, but it was good to see at least James Bradbury hold his own, especially when you're looking at a lot of negatives in the secondary right now and a lot of injuries.
He's had to wear a lot of hats this year. Like, obviously, he started on the outside. Then when Maddox got hurt, he went to the inside. But then he's also playing mentor to Josh Jobe, Eli Ricks, Kaylee Ringo. He, even though he's, 28, 29, like, and we know cornerbacks could probably start to decline quicker just to that position and the type of receivers you're going up against. He's been good. He's been there for the Eagles. So I love that he was able to step up, have a big game against Zach Wilson, albeit. But yeah, we'll see what happens, this week. But Josh Jobe got the start on the outside, and then Ricks came in, if I'm not mistaken, and he was in there until he got hurt too. And like, it's good to see like them giving Eli Ricks an opportunity, because I think Ricks has a chance to be better than Josh Jobe. Obviously not right now, probably, but I think getting more experience and the more playing time that he's going to get and be out on the field, Ricks has a chance to really be the type of player that can be. I'm not going to say he's going to be a number one lockdown, shutdown corner, but he could be the type of corner that can go out there and make a play when you need it and shut down a number 2 or number 3 receiver on the outside. So like, he just needs that opportunity. And I think going forward, like we talked about the injuries, like there is one healthy safety right now, and that's Terrell Edmonds. If there was going to be a day for Howie Roseman to make a move at the safety position, it would have been today. Obviously, he could still make a move Wednesday, Thursday, but like today would have been the day so that you can get whoever it is that you're going to bring in, get them in to kind of learn a package of defensive plays, whether it's a trade for, say a Jeremy Chin or whatnot. But it didn't happen. So I'm not going to lie, I'm worried coming into this upcoming week, because who's playing in the secondary? Who is the other safety? Is Reed going to play, or are they going to play it safe with him? Is Sidney Brown going to be back, or is that hamstring still going to hamper him? Is it going to be Mekhi Gardner? Again, Mekhi Gardner's a cornerback and never played safety. Yeah, he probably, did it in training camp, but it's much different than playing it in a game full speed when you have Tyreek Hill run right at you. So it's going to be interesting what happens at that in the secondary, because there's not a lot of healthy bodies right now. Not at all.
No, there definitely isn't, and I agree with you. Like this was the time. Like, okay, Josiah Scott, you can bring him in because you feel he's comfortable in the defense. He's a guy who kind of knows the defense. It's easy to just insert him and let him play. But at the safety position, I mean, that would have been one of the positions I would have liked to have seen a move at today. I know there was reports that they spent the day Monday looking around at practice squad, shopping around externally. And if they shopped around externally and the best thing that they could come up with on practice squads and teams and to come back with on Tuesday is Josiah Scott, I'm very concerned. Like, at this point, you cannot sit there. When you have a fully healthy safety room, it's easier to say, don't worry about it. I'll deal with it, closer to the trade deadline here in 2 weeks. I'll call up some guy who's semi-retired, just waiting for a phone call. Okay, that's fine. But when you're down to one healthy safety, okay, now you can't deny the need. The need is there because you need to be able to put 2 of them out there generally in the first place, and you don't even have 2 to put out there. And if it's true that, they want to take things slow with Reed Blankenship, it's so unlikely that he plays this week that to me it just makes 0 sense not to go out and get a safety. And I mean, if you look at our practice squad, there's nobody there worth bringing up. And like you said, like, you could get creative with some of the cornerbacks, but even then, eventually you just have to address it. I just don't understand what Howie's resentment is with the safety position, that he just won't do something.
That Tristan McCollum will get called up. I think he's a safety that we have on the
he is.
squad.
He is. Yeah.
But beyond that, I have no idea. Like, and again, you're gonna put Mekhi Gardner or McCollum back there, and their first extensive game action is gonna be Waddle and Hill running right at you. That's not good. Like that's insane to think that that's how you're going to go into the biggest game of the year so far on a Sunday Night Football in front of a national audience. Like, are you going to be satisfied getting blown out 50-20 because you didn't want to go out and improve and kind of try? Again, he could have tried, and it does take two to tango. So it's not always that easy. Because if you calling up Carolina and you're like, yeah, we want Jeremy Chin, and they're like, well, we'll trade you Chin, but for a second round pick, he's not going to do that. So it does take two to tango. It's going to take some negotiation. Maybe something gets made. Look, how many people saw Julio Jones signing with the Eagles? Now, granted, I know he's 34 and he's not coming in here to be the number 1 or number 2 receiver, but Julio Jones was the furthest away from who I thought the Eagles would bring in if it was a receiver.
When I saw the post, I thought it was one of those joke accounts. I was like, Julio Jones, like what's going on here? And then I was like, oh damn, this is actually Schefter.
Yeah. So like, and you like, and he's in an enviable position because he doesn't need to come in and learn the offense. They're going to probably give him a handful of red zone, a couple of red zone plays. Like he doesn't have that speed that he used to have, but he's a big bodied receiver that can potentially catch the ball like in the end zone. Like if you throw in a fade route or something, give him a fade route, give him a slant, something, and he'll help. And again, the Eagles have three healthy receivers right now. Or before they signed Julio, it was AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Olamide Zaccheaus. Devin Allen is not, Brenton Covey is not going to go out there at receiver. Devin Allen are not going to put out there at receiver. So signing Julio Jones makes sense in a practical, like he will be the third or fourth guy. He's not going to be counted on to be the number 1 guy, and he'll be able to. They'll give him 3 or 4 or 5 plays that this is when we want you out there, this is what you're going to do. He's not going to have to learn the entire offensive playbook in 3 days, and he could potentially help. In certain situations, whether it's like a 3rd and 5 or if it's a second and goal or whatever, help the red zone offense. When it comes to safety, like you need to get somebody in here that can play, that has an idea of what the defense is doing. You can't. It's tough to be like, all right, we're bringing you in here. We're going to give you these 10 looks on defense right now, and we'll go from there. It's tough because you only have the one healthy safety. But if you look at it, the Giants, so Justin Pugh signed with the Giants, and they were only going to have him play maybe 15, 20 plays at guard. Then they had an injury. They moved him out to tackle, and he ended up playing the whole game. Like that's like, and granted, he was drafted by the Giants, and it's a totally different offense, but and it's an offensive lineman, and it's not a safety, so it might be a tad bit different. But it's tough to try to learn a defense, and it's going to be Wednesday. Say you did make a move on a Wednesday. So they have to pass the physical, so they're not going to practice Wednesday. So it'll be Thursday. Friday is a walkthrough. Be in the playbook all day Saturday. Be in the playbook Sunday in the locker room, but leading up, like it's so tough. Like, and that's why a move would have to have been made yesterday or today.
I'm almost convinced at this point, like you're going to bring up McCollum and Reed's going to play. But you're going to probably lean on McCollum and Edmonds mainly to deal with it and just have Reed off the bench because you're just that desperate, and which is a shame because I don't think you're going to be able to ease Reed into it or take your time with Reed because you're going to see pretty quickly, especially against Hill and Waddle and Mostert and this tracks team that they have going.
50 yards back.
Yeah, it's not going to be a good day. You're going to have somebody out there. You're just going to have to, and it's going to be Reed Blankenship. The only other point to make from this game that was another disappointing point was Jake Elliott missed only his 2nd field goal of the year. That was a tough one to watch.
If he would have made that, it's
2017.
Well, it would have been 17-3 at the time.
17-3, yeah.
That could potentially change the game.
So that was tough to watch.
It was, but like if you think about it, if it is 17-3 and the game sort of kind of plays out, they get it to 17-12, and say Hurts does throw the interception, you're not going to allow them just to score the touchdown. You could play defense, because if you play defense, maybe Zach Wilson doesn't throw a touchdown pass or they don't score a touchdown. And if they kick a field goal at 17-15, or they go for it on fourth down, they don't get in, the Eagles have the ball up 17-12, Jets don't have timeouts, and they can run the football. So like that field goal did suck, because like we know how accurate and we know how reliable Jake Elliott is. And it was just that type of game for the Eagles on Sunday. Like nothing, what could go wrong went wrong after they were up 14-3.
Exactly. I hope we see a bounce back. I mean, the play, like there was certain things you can point to, like, the play calling, situational plays. There was some things you can point to. It's like that wasn't an off day. This is kind of what we've been seeing. This is kind of what we've gotten to know with Brian Johnson. So, but other things like a lot of the bad luck, the injuries and stuff like that, hopefully that turns around, or Jalen Hurts having an off day. Those things hopefully clean themselves up, and we at least have a chance against Miami. It would be really good, because we got to definitely go into this stretch. And like I said, we got to come out 4-3. Isn't even optimal, because then you're at your 4 losses for the season. So I mean, 5-2 would be more optimal. Then you leave the window open for a couple more losses throughout the year down the backstretch, where I'm almost certain we're going to lose to one of those teams we shouldn't lose to. You just know it's going to happen. But like, so I kind of hope that we get some of those things turn around and the luck is more on our side next week, and the running game is used more. And Brian Johnson has learned from this, because you can't mess around with Miami like you can the Jets. He almost messed around with the Jets and won, but he didn't. So now you can't do the same thing next week against Miami. It's just not going to work. So hopefully that some of those things kind of turn the corner, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
It will be. It definitely will be. And we have the big Kelly Green game. I can't wait to see those Kelly Green jerseys at the link. It's going to be so much fun.
Definitely.
It's going to suck. You can't lose wearing those jerseys, but it is a tough matchup. I think the Eagles should be able to score. I just don't know if they can score enough. And that's going to be the key thing. All right. So before we get out of here, you have any final thoughts on the game? It was so hard. I didn't think our first loss was going to be to the Jets. Honestly, didn't.
I didn't think I'd see, like, I mean, if I'm thinking this year and last year, and even like when Jalen Hurts first started playing the year prior,
this might have been Hurts' worst game as an Eagle.
I think this was the worst game, like all around offensively. Except, like, I mean, that Tampa Bay Bucks game in the playoffs was a pretty embarrassing game, but that was the Bucks. That was a playoff game. Yeah. That was a game that you could go into and kind of expect to lose. This was not one we were going into expecting to lose. I think this was all around one of the worst offensive games I've seen in almost 2.5 years by the Eagles. Like, it was really bad.
The worst game in the Hurts-Sirianni era.
Yeah, that's a good way to say, because I think it is. Like, when I think back and I'm trying to think, like, we gutted it out in some games. There was no guts at all in this game to try and get a win.
As soon as they went up 14-3, they took their foot off the pedal and just offensively couldn't do anything. I mean, you got to give the Jets credit, unfortunately, but we will we'll see what happens. Yeah, that. It did remind me of the Washington loss last year, the first loss of the season last year, a little bit. But we'll see.
I guess the bright side we can look at is, 49ers lost. But I mean, Jim Schwartz is looking like such a good coordinator there. Like, man.
Had an opportunity to go up a game on the Niners, be up 2 games on Dallas still. Now you're only up a game on Dallas, and Dallas has a bye this week. And if the Eagles lose, now it's a half a game. And then Dallas has the Rams before they have to come to Philly. We have Washington, so that game in Philly is pretty much going to be for first place if things go like it. There were so many things that the Eagles, again, you only have, as I said at the beginning, about 4 losses that if you want to get the number 1 seed, and this couldn't be one of those losses.
This isn't baseball or
Kansas City, Buffalo, one of the Dallas games, maybe Seattle, San Francisco. Like they weren't going 17-0, and that's not what we were asking them to do. Was go 17-0, but like you have to think there's games that you should win, and this was one that they didn't win. But we're thinking there's probably games that we we predict it to be losses, that they might win. So like it could be a balancing act. So hopefully.
But we
see.
talked like leading up to this about how important it was to come out of this 6-0 and head into this stretch of 7 games and be able to give a little. 5-1, so. But now we can't really give as much as we were hoping. Yeah, they're 5-1, but I mean, one lot like in a 17 game season, one loss is a big loss, especially when you had the opportunity, like you said, to take full control of first in the NFC and then 2 games up in the NFC. So like you had a chance to really create some ground there and to leave the window open for this stretch of games, to lose a couple games and still be okay. And now, just like you said, like this isn't hockey. This isn't 82 games. Like there's not enough times, not enough losses to have. Like you can't give up that many losses. But now we hit the tough part of the schedule, and I think it's going to start to get really interesting to see because, well, I mean, Washington's not as tough, but divisional matchup again. So obviously, you know, we always worry about divisional matchups because they always come to play. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, should we look at, you know, a more positive thing?
Do you have a positive thing?
I was just thinking our unheralded player was a positive for some player.
Before we finish off, let's move to our unheralded player of the week for week 6 in the National Football League. And by unheralded, we don't want the superstars. We don't want Patrick Mahomes. We don't want Joe Burrow. Like we don't want the guys that you anticipate stepping up and having big games. Somebody that's kind of under the radar. Who's your unheralded player of the week?
I'm going to the Vegas Raiders, and I'm picking Michael Mayer. I mean, I like Mayer through the process, through the draft process and stuff. And like, he was kind of expected to be this higher pick, like 2 years out and stuff when people were projecting out and looking at the skill there. And then he kind of fell in the draft. The Vegas Raiders took him, and he hasn't really had much of an opportunity to prove himself. And then finally here he is, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 75 yards in a Vegas Raiders win over the New England Patriots, who are looking horrible. And now the Vegas Raiders are here trying to essentially save Josh McDaniels' life, which makes no sense to me. I think he needs to be fired, but that's fine. So I'm going with Michael Mayer because I liked him through the process. I thought he was a good tight end. He's a boring tight end. He's very boring, but to me,
I don't like him because he went to Notre Dame.
Okay, yeah, but he reminded me of Zach Ertz, like through college and stuff. Like he seems really boring. He doesn't get a whole lot of yards after the catch, but you know he does the trick, and he seems like a guy who can put up games like this and be an important part of your offense when you want to make him an important part of your offense. So you know that's where I went with this one.
All right, Quentin, we are going to do our Miami Eagles show on Friday. We'll give our predictions then.
Come by and give your prediction then too.
Yeah, but that'll be a fun one to talk about on Friday. So my unheralded player is actually a former Eagles draft pick on the defensive side of the ball, and he helped the Washington Commanders defeat the Atlanta Falcons 24-16. I'm going Casey Toohill. He had 2 sacks. It was Desmond Ritter's first home loss in college or the pros. And again, Casey Toohill was an Eagles draft pick. Got some defensive playing time, had a couple of sacks on Ritter. And the Washington Commanders are quietly 3-3 right now. And again, coming into the season, I said the Giants were going to be a dumpster fire, and they are a dumpster fire. I thought the Commanders would be a little bit better. I didn't know if – I forget. I think I had them at 5 or 6 wins. They're already halfway there at this point. But again, I'm
surprised. Like I always say, because I think was it been the past 2 or 3 years, I've said, you know, the Washington Commanders are underrated because they have a great defense. But this year, I don't like Sam Howell. I didn't like Sam. I thought that the choice to roll that wasn't great. He hasn't been that good. He's not going to win you championships. He's not going to do anything in a playoff game. Yeah. So I hope that Washington sees like they got to really do something at the quarterback position. But I mean, same goes for, you know, the Atlanta Falcons 3-3, but definitely need to address the quarterback position. Desmond Ridder ain't the answer. But yeah, the Washington Commanders, I always feel are underrated because they have such a good defense, but they just can't get it right on offense. And it shows.
They can't get it right at quarterback. They have weapons.
And they can't. Yeah. And I mean, look at it. They're 3-3 with a minus 43 point differential. Like, They've scored 133 points for. It's terrible. And I mean, you look at the Giants; they have 71 points for. So I mean, it could be a lot worse, but still,
that is really bad.
That is.
It's like the Minnesota Vikings last year. They had about 13 wins, 14 wins, and had a negative.
Who else is there? The New England Patriots have 72, and the Steelers have 79. But no one is as bad as the Giants at 71.
How many points have the Giants given up to?
167. So they got a minus 96 point differential. Even the Patriots, it's only minus 80.
6 games through the season and they have minus 96. That's crazy. Hopefully they don't figure it out by the end of the year.
I hope that they regret that Daniel Jones contract. I'm happy they gave it, but I hope they regret it because you can't sit there. You don't have a ton of injuries. Your offensive line was bad. Injuries or no injuries, your offensive line was bad. They were not looking like a good team. And it's like the running joke. The New York Giants have been trying to build that offensive line for like a decade now, and they just cannot seem to get. They go and pick Evan Neal. And he's not looking like he did in college. Like you just can't. They can't get it. They can't get it.
Joe Shane. Remember they were all hype about hiring Joe Shane as their new their new general manager, and it's much of the same as it was with Gettleman. It seems like you don't pay your running back, which I guess is smart, but you give $40 million to Daniel Jones, who's a stiff. He's a ball.
That contract was bad. There was nothing that warranted $40 million. If he was going to hold out, I would have said, see you later. We will go and get somebody.
Yeah. Nobody was going to sign that dude to a $40 million contract. He's terrible. All right, Connor. Glad you're feeling better. Well, hopefully your seasonal allergies don't flare up this week as we get set for the Philadelphia Eagles, the Miami Dolphins, Sunday Night Football, Kelly Green game. Can't wait. I love those. I can't wait to see those jerseys on the field. Hopefully you look good, you play good, you look good, you feel good, and you play good. That's what I'm hoping for the Philadelphia Eagles. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHerrell54. And follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook by searching Edge of Philly Sports. You can also go to EOPsports.com for all your Philadelphia sports coverage. And for you guys that were chatting it up with us, thank you for your input. Join us again on Friday as the Philadelphia Eagles and the Miami Dolphins are set to do battle on Sunday night. And we will have our preview and give our predictions for the game this week. For Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.